Hello everyone again, and welcome to another episode of the Just About Managing podcast. And you'll be pleased to know we have another great guest for you today. And as he pointed out when he joined the call, he has actually followed the same haircut routine as most of us. So he is a true fourth member of the Bald Eagles Club. And I'd love to introduce you to Eamon Devlin, who's joined us today. So he's going to join Chris and John, talk a bit about himself, what his background, and then talk about what he's doing now. And we'll get into interlinks then. That feed into hopefully a great discussion with the four of us in here. Eamon, actually, we connected just through a mutual, I think, liking of a sports psychologist post, actually. And then I reached out to you, and you kindly gave me some time to have a great conversation a couple of weeks ago. And then when I said, would you like to be on the podcast? Miraculously, he said, yes, I'd love to. So we thought we'd steal his time before he gets busy again. But just to kick us off, though, Eamon, are you okay to give us some background on yourself, as much as you want to sort of share in there, and then what you're doing now and what sort of impact that's having, if that's okay?
I'll do my best. Hello, Chris. Hello, John. Nice to meet you both. Hello, Lee, again. So I'll give you a bit about sort of where I'm from, what I was doing, what I'm doing now, if that's okay. So I grew up in Northern Ireland. So I'm 46 years old, born in 78. And I grew up in the Troubles during the armed sort of conflict in Northern Ireland, which wasn't that great, to be honest. So I grew up in a place called Crossmaglen, which was this very, very sad fact of being the most militarized village in Europe. So when I got to 18, I basically wanted to move away and, to be honest, find a safe life. It was a very unsafe place to live. Lots of things happened which should never have happened to people. So on the plus side, I became very driven at school because of that. Became a nerd. Wasn't a very naturally talented student by any mark, but I was quite sort of determined to find a different way of living. So I became got sort of decent at the books, or at least good at remembering stuff, and then regurgitating it as the old, maybe even current education system is. Became a lawyer. I was a lawyer for 22 years. Was very fortunate, worked in some great teams, worked in some big law firms. And then about 14 years ago, myself and another chap, a guy called Matthew Hudson, formed a law firm, which is in the sort of financial services sector. And that business did very well for a period of time. It was in the sort of venture capital, private equity space. To be honest, we're just lucky. It was a space that was growing. Frankly, if you couldn't grow a business during that time, then you should pack your bags and do something different. So, all boats rise, and whatever the phrase is. So the business became, it was only two of us at the beginning, and then it was like, I think, 400 at one stage.
Wow.
And the business then listed. We've got in the stock exchange. And actually that's when it started turning south for me, actually. I started realizing it started becoming very, very sad. So as you know, when you get to list your company on the LSE, you get to go to Paternoster Square, you ring the bell, there's lots of press. And I couldn't even go that day. I actually couldn't even, I couldn't face attending the meeting. And so then I kind of started realizing, I had this feeling I was climbing the wrong pole. Actually, I've been climbing this pole for 2 decades. And then I didn't say get to the top of it, but it was, our team had made good progress to get to that stage. And so I kind of hung around for a couple of years. I probably should have left then. And then I got really ill, actually. So there's a bit of up and down in this story. Because I was very focused on work for 20 odd years. Frankly, I was addicted to work. I was, much to the, everything was second else, right? My family was second else, didn't know my kids well. And at one stage, I've got one colour of my wife's eyes. So when I left work, then I'd kind of, quote unquote, nothing to do apart from important things like look after my family. Sort of longer story short, I could end up in what's called a trauma recovery centre, which I woke up one morning and I said to my wife, this is not going to end well. The place was so dark, couldn't get any joy in anything. Things that normally give me happiness just wasn't there. And on the face of it, I had everything. I had a lovely wife, lovely kids. We'd done well, sort of work-wise. And luckily, I went to this trauma recovery centre in Spain for 58 days. And luckily, I'd got to the stage where I was able to put my ego to one side. I finally was able to go, right, this is. Eamon's thinking's got me to this stage, which isn't a very good stage. And luckily, I found some great people, got some great help. I think luckily I got so bad, I was willing to listen. I think it took me to get to a very serious condition. So then I came out of, I sort of survived that amazing experience, met some great people. And then I thought, what am I going to do now in my life? So, because doing nothing is not very good for I seem to get in trouble when I do nothing. So when I was getting a lot of therapy, which was kind of related to my upbringing in the North in the 70s and 80s, I was quite interested in how the brain operates. I thought, well, this is interesting. Why do we think in certain ways? So I thought, well, I'll do a master's to kind of keep myself out of, something to do for a year. So I did a master's online for 10 months. And then for my dissertation, I was scratching my, baldy head to see what I would do. And then none of the topics that came out I did wasn't that intrigued on. I'd been a coach in 2 sports for about 15 years. And I always write down the list of things I'm not very good at. And this list was getting longer each year, not getting shorter. And pretty high up the list was half times. Never liked them as a player, never liked them as a coach. And so I ended up basically researching, what makes a good halftime talk. And from that, then I've basically created, a small consultancy business. Now I spend my time working with managers and coaches in all different codes, basically try to redesign the halftime break. So that's a long introduction. There we go.
Wow. It's fantastic. I mean, thanks for being so open with it as well, Amy, because I think it's, I don't mean to stand lightly, but it's inspiring to hear that as well, and sort of the ups and downs, as you say, real ups and downs that you face there, but where it's brought you to and that transition. I think we've all been through that transition of work to different types of work, but in very different ways, and certainly not in that same level that you did, certainly, Eamon, there. So thanks ever so much for sharing that. But I think it's what I loved when we spoke before was that sort of that mentality around the halftime team talks, as you said, and what happens at the moment in halftime team talks in possibly all sports. Without sort of breaking confidentiality or anything, but what's the sort of themes that you see in half times that are wrong at the moment at times, you think?
It depends on what sport. So I work across basketball, football, soccer, hockey, Gaelic football was my home sport, and ice hockey. So the big thing is coaches who speak too much. So in football, we've got you've got a 15-minute break, which transpires as too long in my view. Of course, what do people do when they got more time? Talk more. So I did a test with a Premiership team recently, where the manager spoke for 3 minutes. I would say a charismatic manager. He knows what he's doing. I think he's easy to listen to. It was in a friendly game. He spoke for 3 minutes, 10 seconds. Then I checked what could the players remember, what Coach X said, before they started the second half. And the results were pretty bad. In fact, the manager actually thought I'd made up the results. They weren't bad. So yes, they could kind of broadly talk about, yes, he talked about his pressing. He talked about intensity, lots of, magnets moving around on the board. But when you really kind of drill down, what did actually Coach Smith say to you? Yeah, it's so. I think
that was the 3-minute version, let alone a 15-minute conversation.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the coaches realise that maybe 3 things are what you can talk about. When you get the transcripts or see the videos, you go, well, sorry, coach, you haven't talked about 3 points. When you really analyse, you've made about 12 points. I think, because depending how you divide, a point or a statement. So I've come at the angle of from the player's point of view, because there is. So just to step back a little second. So in the world of sports psychology, there are only 8 papers on half times. That's in all sports. So including there's 2 in rugby, 2 in football, 1 in basketball, 1 in that. So there's very little. So to give you an example, there's probably 500 papers on how people behave on a Zoom call, like literally. Genuinely, there will be, at least 500. So, and so I asked, so I came up from a player. Well, what do they want from halftime? Because most existing research is what the coach thought. And I thought, well, who cares what the coach thinks? This halftime is seemingly for the players. So I basically back the consultancy basically trying to design half times to make it more impactful for players. And one of the key things is just getting the coach, frankly, just to say less, if not, ideally, nothing at all. To be honest with you.
I've got so many questions I want to ask, so I'm going to have to shut up though, because you're kind of blowing my mind a bit. Do you find you kind of said when from Lee's first question depends on the sport. So do you find that what your observation of the different sports is an element of cultural breeding of how a coach talks to them in that half time that is making some of those changes?
So I did a line of thought and I didn't finish it off. So I've got kind of an internal sort of unofficial ranking of sports.
Right.
Football is the lowest in
Wow.
terms of quality or effectiveness. Rugby is second. Basketball is number one. So a lot of it, So look, you talk about cultural references. So I looked into about 3 months ago why we even have a first half and a second. When you look at a game of sport, right? It's quite an odd thing to have. Like we have a first half and a second half. In most games, you just play a game, and it transpires the link actually is to do with back in the olden days, as my elder daughter calls them. Rugby, the posh private schools would have their own version of football or rugby. So rugby would play Harrow, and in the first half of the game, you'd play the home team's version of the game. And then the game would just split in half, and then suddenly you just switch the code so the away team could play their version of the game. And then we introduced a little sort of break in between, so we can have a little bit of probably a cigarette and a drink. I don't know. So I think from rugby point of view, you look at what the coaches do during a test match. They're not allowed to speak to their players. That's why they're in the box. Whereas football, the coaches are quite usually involved, right? "Quote unquote" coaching players during the match, but I think it's controlling personally. So I think that, and so it's a long way of saying the coach then basically enters the changing room in a very different mental state, John. Because if you've been arguing with the fourth official for 45 minutes, I worked with one coach recently, and we did a little test. I could see he was very worked up, but he wasn't able to communicate very well. And we worked out his heart rate was 133 just before the moment he's about to speak to his players. And I'll let you decide if somebody at 133 is able to command a room. And so now, he's actually given we monitor his heart rate, and he's not allowed to speak until it comes down to, I think it's 93. And I think, and probably linking to business a bit, I certainly work with people where their heart rate was quite high up, and I don't think they're ready to communicate.
Yeah. I think also back to that business piece, and just you're talking again there, Eamon. It's back to that business piece again. We talk about half time after that break and the thing, but we look back to business and just team meetings at times, and what's that differentiation of people speaking in team meetings, and is it the leader speaking all the time, and how much is actually absorbed again? Is it that mixture of people within the teams now, and it's there for the team as opposed to the leader? To your point again, Eamon, but there's so many parallels there, I think, as you go through it.
Yeah, I think I'm still learning this. I'm still new to this, so I'm sure I have a lot to learn, a lot I don't know, lots of mistakes I'll make. But I'm getting a fairly clear picture that what information people on board is very limited. It's very limited. And actually, so one of the things we work with coaches is when people, not generally coaches, just when they speak, as many CEOs, when they speak, they just use words. Or there's a presentation which, frankly, is very poor. It's just loads of words. I mean, there's some very easy wins, right, in presenting.
Yeah.
Why do you have 100 words in your presentation on one slide? Like and it transpires that we learn with our eyes. So people talk about visual learners. I think that's an unfortunate phrase, because if you have the gift of sight, so we got 5 senses, obviously: hearing, seeing, touching, smelling. From what our brain remembers is about 80% from what we see, 80. And when you're stressed and anxious, which players will be at a halftime meeting or in a workplace at a review meeting where your levels of anxiety would be pretty high, using words and audio is actually a pretty bad idea. because it's very tiring to listen to somebody, to speak a voice you don't recognize. Maybe they have an accent, whereas so that's one of the things of how much information people take in.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had my time in sort of normal business again, I'd have a lot more meetings, but a lot shorter ones, with no PowerPoints. Actually, funny enough, I wouldn't, no Excels. I just sit the group round in the circle and go, right, guys, let's have an honest conversation this morning. And Lee, tell me how I'll go first. I'll tell you what I'm not doing well, and just try to get some what I call burst the balloon, burst the pleasure, but let's just cut the facade here, guys. Let's get through the surface level stuff, and let's go and let's have an actual conversation, as opposed to just like, I'm going to dictate to you what you feel. Okay, see how that goes.
So I'm inquisitive. So when with your, if we go back to the Premier League manager, the kind of deconstruction and to actually then get him to change his method of halftime communication, it must be really quite a difficult task, because you're unpicking years of behavior and also almost like trying to reprogram a method of communication all in one. So it's not something you can do overnight by any means, I'm sure.
No, and actually I've realised that football is a reluctant industry to look at itself. It's very and look at, and the changing room is probably somebody call it the holy sanctum. It's cameras aren't usually allowed in there, right? You got the odd documentary, but that's all highly edited stuff, right? That's the manager approves what, like Pep will approve, right? What gets released on Prime, and so when I work with teams, first thing I say was, can you send me a recent halftime talk? And I've learned through the hard way, if they don't send me one, then we're not working together. And I say, look, you're just going to burn your club's money, waste talking to some baldy guy you don't really know or trust. If you're not willing to have I say to every coach, I think CEO, any leader can do it. Video your next talk, and give it. If you have kids, give it to your kids to review. They will. Well, certainly my kids will give it to me between the absolute middle of the eyes. But they're doing it out of a place of love, right? They'll probably say what they see. Most people will tell you, my dad told me this, most people will tell you what you want to hear. That's always quite stuck with me. Mm-hmm. Most people will tell you what you want to hear. And so do you have people around you who are willing to tell you what you don't want to hear? So I think it's a simple win. It's a video. And CEOs or whatever, or just leaders of a team can say, look, I'm trying to get better too, right? I'm asking you to get better in your day job. So I don't think it's I think it's quite grounding, thing to say, but maybe I'm biased.
Wow. And in terms of that hierarchy, Eamon, you were talking about soccer and football and then rugby and basketball at the other end. And you were also mentioning shorter updates. So is there a trend that you're seeing around like American sports where they have a lot more kind of like stop-start interaction between the coach and the team? And there's, just they're better at it, are they? I don't know. I'm just surmising. Yeah. Because it's more rigorous and, I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. You're spot on. So basketball coaches, I think, because they have timeouts, right? They roughly have NBA about 20 points during the match outside of halftime to tweak your players. So frankly, they've got really good at being concise communicators. Mm-hmm. I've got 60, and by the way, same as boxing coaches. So if you ever I also to football managers or basketball, just watch some boxing, because if you got 12 rounds, you've got 11 half times. Mm. And it's fascinating listening to boxing coaches, because they truly understand that break is for the player. Whereas in some sports, maybe even some business worlds, they think it's about the manager or the leader. Okay, but maybe it's for your team, right? Or maybe it's for your players. I think it depends how you view. Why do you have it? Who's it for? Right? Those are very big gating questions. But you're right. I think the coaches who have got opportunities to do it more often and concisely, frankly, become better communicators. I think, because they can practice communicating concisely. And we have this rule internally that if we get a draft speech through, we have the six-year-old rule. Which if a 6-year-old can't understand it, sorry guys, go back again and try again, because, well, if you're playing in La Liga or for England, you've got plenty of, the analogy I use actually is a glass of, it's not even well, this glass is like so 3/4 full. Players come in at the break. They have plenty of emotions themselves, right? They have plenty of thoughts. Sometimes that glass is nearly full, and maybe it's moving a little bit. And then the coach and what I call the rest of the coaching team, what I call the coaching circus, comes in with all the statistics and all these talks, and the backs coach and the opposition coach and psychologists and the shareholders in there sometimes, and they're about to try to dump in about 8 minutes of data information. But the glass is full, guys. It's just literally the body can't absorb it. So I think that's another thing: is are your team ready to actually listen to what's going on? I think people need time to. So the other analogy we try to use is if you're let's say that Chris is the head coach of England, you've got your 11 planes flying. Are you a Man City fan? Is that right, Chris? Are you?
No, United.
Oh, okay.
Definitely need some coaching there.
Okay, I need some coaching in remembering what team names. So
So I could be Pep, but I
okay.
look more like Eric, right?
Okay,
So
let's say Eric, right? So this will work better. So the first, you're playing against Man City. The first half hasn't gone well. You're 4-0 down. You're the head coach. You've got 11.
Again, Eamon. It's like last week.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, so that's deja vu. So you're 4-0 down. You've got your 11 players who are basically flying. So you've got 11 airplanes that day, fighter planes. Some are flying, hopefully, on direction according to your game plan. Some are flying southeast, completely the wrong way. Some have crashed by their own emotions. The noise of the crowd, maybe the keeper's let in too easy. Like, it's just the brains has gone on fire. They're all flying at slightly different elevations because they all got different strengths and power, and they've all used different amount of energy in the first half. When the whistle goes by the ref, I think your job as air traffic control is try to get those planes to land under Old Trafford slowly, safely, where the airplanes are just lined up. There's no kind of pile up. The planes are sitting still, engines off, time to refuel. Does that because the planes are still flying, and you're trying to communicate with them? I don't know if they can even, never mind even hear you, can even see you. So there's and we worked out roughly that takes about 8 minutes of a half time, where these planes take time to just come back to be ready to listen. And even then, I'm not guaranteeing they're going to listen to the coach, but often, the manager comes in after like 32 seconds, go, I've got all these problems to fix. And I'm sure you have, coach, but you're talking to the wall. If it makes you feel better, then crack on. But if they want to help your players, I'm not sure that's the best way of doing it.
Have you seen, because I've not heard that before at all. I think it's a great analogy, Eamon, as you say, but have you seen anybody do that well, without naming names, that goes, actually, we're just going to give the first part of that half time for people to come back down to earth and land safely?
Not so much in football, although some managers hopefully getting a bit better. I think rugby's very good. I mean, I had a chance to interview Clive Woodward recently, and the reason why I interviewed him was because he had redesigned the half time for the 2001-2003 England team. So he was the first manager to give players a new kit at half time. So new jerseys, new socks, because he realised he actually believed it's two games you're playing. So, and he'd have the scoreboard, and I think relevant to business, he was a scoreboard at half time, every half time 0-0. Because the objective is to try to win, get more points in the second half, regardless of what's happened in the first half. I think similarly with, if you're in business competition, you're competing with somebody, right? And if you don't know your competitors, then frankly you need to probably look harder who they are. So you're trying to outdo, right? Let's be honest, you're trying to outdo the competitor. It's a zero-sum game, right? Effectively, in business. Yeah. So, he had a 0-0, and he would have. So he's the first guy I know of. He introduced silence at the beginning of halftime, which 20 years ago, frankly, was pretty like that would have been, I suspect, quite like what? He must have telling Martin Johnson to be like 4 minutes not to say anything. Chris, you can go tell Martin Johnson he can't say anything. 4 minutes. So yeah, I think the rugby crowd are much better, because I think rugby, I'm generalising here, but the rugby coaches try to leave the players in charge of the game during halftime. Whereas with some sports, the coaches try to take back control of it. And I think that's where it can become less effective.
The other thing we spoke about, Eamon, a little bit that really intrigued me was you talked about, again, the difference between rugby and football with regard to rugby coaches not being able to communicate or not being allowed to communicate with their players during the first half or during the game. And you talked there a little bit about then, and I think this comes back to business again, I'm trying to think what the right word is, the preconceptions of what a leader or a manager or a coach should be in those sports. And when you were talking to managers about maybe a football manager should spend the first half in the stands, but the sort of the challenge that those managers you spoke to about that faced with regard to what it meant for them. Can you share that a little bit as well?
Yeah, so I think I'm firmly believe that if you're trying to help a coach at half time, then you need to look at what he or she does for the previous 50 minutes, because you just don't show up. I mean, obviously, what you've done before, like any of us today, it all depends what you've done this morning. It all impacts how you are right now. I think having being able to, I think most managers I speak to understand it makes sense sit in row 14 F, but the common answer I get in football is no, but I can't, Amy, because the crowd expect it, and the team. I'm there for the cameras. My performance doing this, which transpires reminds you of an angry chimpanzee, is when literally when the players come in. I mean, if you're on the big stadium, you can't even hear beyond. I mean, and even the big stadium, the pitch is even curved. You can't even see the far side of the pitch very well. The pitch is literally most of the pitch are, so there's quite a big dip actually in those. So you can't really see the game very well. So you're kind of doing it for show. And this idea that you're shouting at Lee, pass the ball to Chris. I really don't think that's. And if any parents are here listening for underage, I really don't think it's coaching. I think it's a form of control, and it's basically the coach saying to in your case, Lee, you're not able to make that decision to pass the ball to Chris. So therefore, because you're not, exactly. Chris can communicate yourself, but I think you reduce people's self-esteem. I think.
Yeah.
But basically telling them you're not able to make that decision. So I say to all coaches, the more you want to control players, if you want to control your players, then keep talking. Each word you say to a player on game day is kind of telling them you can't do it, dude. So therefore, I need to intervene.
Wow. I mean, we've got this thing here between, accountability of the players and the team to drive the result. And then you've got different countries with different levels of hierarchy bias, right? Particularly if cricket and, India and cricket, do you see any differences between the accountability and the hierarchy, depending upon countries at the moment?
Yeah,
as well as
much data set there.
Typical consultancy grid of sports this way and countries that way.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering if there's any kind of trends there. I don't know.
I probably have enough I work at some states in the US, Australia, so this whole part of the world I don't know anything right, so I'm probably not the best person to. I mean, I have noticed for example, some of the US coaches, to just bring so much more, again, just much more fun to it. And so I, walk into some really English dressing rooms. It's I'm looking around, who's died today, guys? It's so I kid you not, there's a team, because for some teams I kind of realize we need to make it less serious here. John coming in and telling the team this is a must-win game. I mean, I don't know if you want to analyze the psychology of it, but saying it's a must-win game, just basically threatening the players by saying that. Because you're not giving them any alternative. And by the way, it's a game. The sun will rise tomorrow, and we'll all go about our business tomorrow, right? Ultimately. So there's one team I've I'll probably get fired for making this recommendation to them. Is the team sit at halftime and they there's a tennis ball and a bucket, and the first thing they do is try to get the tennis ball into the bucket, just to break the ice. There's another group, they've just started doing a joke idea where each game, a player takes a turn, beginning at half time, tell a joke. And to be honest, it's a willing crowd, right? You know, even quote as a bad joke, even better, right? Because it's even funnier.
Yeah.
So you can't lose almost, I don't think. And it just breaks the kind of, because these guys are like, they're the emotions of a player at half time. I mean, it'll obviously vary, but fear is usually pretty high up. Anxiety is off the scales, but if you're losing. And loneliness is very common, believe it or not. Loneliness is very common.
That whole psychological safety axis in our like management speak, right? And like how we create that as like leaders is just huge. So it just makes me think of just how much of a genius back in the day we all had hair then, like when I think we did because we were so young. But like Brian Clough, created such a fun environment, and and what do you want us to do? Pass to each other, and that was it.
Yeah.
Right. See you in half an hour, see you in 45 minutes. It was pretty much that, wasn't it? And he took Division 2 team to the title and 2 European Cups in like 3 years. You won't say what happened after that, but like in terms of his, I mean, that Lee for you, that just must be like really highlight, the power of Fluffy.
Oh, it's phenomenal. And it's, again, Eamon and I talked about this a little bit as well, because I told Eamon I was a Forest fan. But it was, it goes back to a little bit, and you hear so many stories about him in the changing rooms, but everything he seemed to do was to simplify things again and stay out of the way a lot of the time. And it was, it had such an impact, I think, on getting the best out of people that shouldn't have been at that level, in all honesty. You look at John Robertson, who was unbelievable at that time. Basically, he was an overweight left winger who couldn't really run, but he was a world beater. And there was something about that Clough brought in, and Taylor together. They definitely worked as a partnership there as well.
I think I've now spoken to 2 or 3 players who played under Brian Clough. And there's one particular, so I've become like you actually. I'm obsessed with Brian Clough, I have to say. So, mainly because it just seemed to me he's really good at being impactful. So to give you an example, so you might have heard the story. So Brian Clough signed Trevor Francis in 1979, first £1 million signing from, was it Coventry? Anyway,
Birmingham.
Was it Birmingham? Thank you.
Yeah.
For my fact checker.
Thank you, Stato.
Anytime.
And I don't know if it's online, the short press conference, but basically he comes in, press conference is going, a lot of cameras, BBC all around the world, first 7-digit signing, and the chief exec is there, the chairman is there, Trevor Francis, and a whole load of journos. No sign of Brian Clough. Rolls up at 45 minutes, coming to the end, opens the door, Brian Clough strolls in, quite a bit almost like, what's going on here today? Wearing his gym outfit and carrying a squash record. And he walks up to the head table, and then one of the journalists said to Francis, "Do you look forward to playing on Saturday?" And Brian Clough says, "Trevor Francis will play when I pick him." End of question. So, I mean, you analyze that in a whole different way, but he said one sentence. People are not unlikely to forget what he said, because he just said. I was actually analysing Eric Cantona recently, the some famous seagulls. I mean, it's absolutely. You might think it's marvelous, but to create impact. So what I try to get coaches to do, I think I always suggest what managers do. I think there's an issue of over communicating, trying to get people's attention too often. So in football context, I look at some managers, actually pretty rugby. Actually, try to get maybe twice to speak during each training session. They might train twice a day. Flying away to a game. Night before the talk, a big presentation, before you get in the bus, another talk, sometimes speak in the bloody bus. There's a pre-game talk, the game start, a few more words before you're back in the pitch, and then you hold. So, hang on, only in game day you try to get their attention 5 times. I mean, it's good luck getting impact when you try to do it a lot, right? And so one of the things I try to say to managers is maybe don't say anything some games. Just see how they get on without your, frankly, interference a lot of the times.
It's funny. It's kind of a parallel. So my favorite interview question I have when I'm interviewing people jobs is, teach me something I don't know in the most concise manner. And
I'll write that down.
and people that you don't necessarily want to employ are the ones that overfixate about what they're going to say. And I can pretty much everybody I've hired, even to this day, since I've been asking that question, I can remember what they told me.
Wow.
And it's very relevant to a point, which is the subject's irrelevant of what they teach you, but it's the manner in which they deliver it that actually leaves it in your memory. And it's very there's a real I think there's a real parallel there, sort of the work world to what you're talking about in terms of that sporting world. When you're interviewing someone, inevitably, because generally in the corporate world, it's such a fucked up system in terms of how you interview people. You have an hour with someone to decide whether you're going to work with them for the next maybe decade, and you're trying to see through the corporate facade of who this person really is and how do they communicate and will they get along with everyone. And I don't take any credit for creating that question. It was actually one of my colleagues who came up with it when we were trying to build out a question bank. But it just works. It doesn't matter what role you're talking to people about. It just works. But I think to me, it's the same way that I can truly understand what you're saying about the manager and reducing the volume they talk, but actually that quality. So for me, there's a good parallel there.
Well, thank you for that question. I wasn't. I'm going to nix that and I'm going to play on my own. But you're right. One of the things I used to say, Coach, less is more. So one of the so I often with some of the workshops I do, I often start off with a I don't say that in the beginning. I just start with a video, and the video is a clip from a safety briefing for an airplane. So depending what team it is, either EasyJet or it's like Fly Emirates, depending what level of group you're talking to, and so 30 seconds, and I cut it short because the whole safety briefing is about 3 minutes 40 seconds on an airplane, and there's about 33 elements to it. But what happens is, next time you fly, I recommend anybody do this. Next time you fly, try to listen to all of it. Next time you sit on a plane, you will find it virtually impossible to listen to all of it because you've heard it before, and you think you know what's going to say next, but although you can't remember what it's going to say next, so your brain finds something better to do. And so if a coach, frankly, has the same mode, same kind of words each time, it's not that the players don't want to listen to him or her. The brain will just find something more important in its ranking to do. So that's why variety is so important. And if you're giving long speeches 4 times a game day, then that's difficult to keep it fresh.
I think it's how the other piece that springs to mind is how you talk as well, Eamon. I think we talked about this again a little bit when we previously spoke about the sort of storytelling aspect, if you like, in there. But you shared it actually, a video on LinkedIn the other day from AJ Venter, the Springbok player, and I've since had a conversation with him actually off the back of you sharing that, which was great, really interesting to hear. But he shared a video that he said they used to use, I think, before every game, so it may get repetitive to your point in there, but it's Al Pacino's halftime team talk in Any Given Sunday. And it was that difference between, none of, I know it's a film in there, but that difference of none of that was tactics. It was about passion, about storytelling, about igniting people from within.
Yeah, I think, I'm again, I'm biased, but I think there's a great place for the storytelling and prop telling. And, again, go back to you asked for different countries. And I think the US is quite good at, I'd say, Chris, at storytelling. They're quite brave. And they're, okay, I'm going to be brave here, not talk about X's and O's. Not talking about the balance sheet today. You're not going to talk about there are statistics on the pitch. I'm going to go for emotion, because if you got a group of people in your team or on the pitch who frankly don't believe that what's been asked to do is achievable, then I would strongly argue there's no point talking about tactics. Because in order to achieve, I really believe you need a kind of foundation of thought we can do this together as a group. If that has gone, then I don't think having a 9-minute talk on your pressing or your inverted fullbacks or in your how we're going to build out Asia or like, it's just so. So I'll try 1 and 3 of you, right? See if it works. It may not work. It didn't work in Zoom. So I want to close. We need 3 to close your eyes, or invite you to close your eyes. You don't have to. I'm not going to pick Man City now because that didn't work well last time. So I'm going to pick Arsenal versus Liverpool, and John is the manager of Liverpool. So you come in at half time and John's team is losing 4-0. And this game is to get into the Champions League next year. So it's a make or break game for both teams. You come into the change room in Anfield, 4-0 down, the crowd are absolutely baying for blood. Walk into the change room and there's complete, almost virtual silence in the change room, almost like a smell of someone's like passed away. No one's talking, no one's even drinking, and there's a very, sense of fear. And then John starts speaking and says, some of you think this game is lost. I'll be honest with you. I think this game is lost. But I can deal with that. It's a game of football. But what now is at stake is your character. And you're going to need your character a lot long after you hang up your boots for this club and any other club. Because you haven't shown up today. I can promise you, when you come back through those doors in about 45 minutes' time, you're going to know a little bit more about yourself. Because you're now in a situation where there's hardly any hope of getting a result, and you're about to see how you react in that situation. So this is a test of character. I'm not making any changes to the first 11 because you deserve a chance to see who you are. End of talk. Off you go.
Wow.
By the way, to be clear, I stole that from a very he's actually passed away now, American football coach. I should know his name before I mentioned it. But I firmly believe there's a way, the analogy I use is a halftime talk is never going to change the result of the game on its own because only the players can fix the problems. The analogy I sometimes use is if I got very ill today, I'd be rushed to the JR hospital where I live in Oxford. I'll be transferred very quickly into high dependency unit. The purpose of high dependency unit is not to get you better, it's to stop you from dying. And I think with a reimagining halftime talk, people can just reimagine a different world for a few seconds, just to stop them from falling like emotionally. This idea you can just get some like foundation under your feet. And I think if I did business like normal business again, Chris, Lee, and John, I think I'd have a good look at does the team need to be inspired today? Because I haven't met anybody in life who hasn't got can't frankly fathom a bit more inspiration. And I think that's overlooked. I think people we would just assume because people are getting paid for their jobs that they're motivated. Well, motivation, is anyway. So I think that, and you couldn't do it every week, right, with your team. But I think occasionally, and if it's personal to you, people it seems love you having a go at something different. If you talk about one of your kids or something's like people can see when it's real, right? They know when it's real. They know when it's.
I think just think about what you're saying there, and I think back to the work world and leaders in there. And there's often that piece you remember great leaders, but not because of what you did and what you achieved, but how you felt and how they made you feel. And I think you made a point earlier about the must-win game. I've worked with some great leaders. I've worked with some not so great leaders, and the ones that stick in my mind are the ones that made you feel so good about what you were doing, why you were doing it, how you were doing it, the team you were in. The ones, and I can remember one, I can think of one very specifically, where it was literally that must-win game all the time. That was all it would talk about. We've got to get this over the line for client. We have to. There is no, it was that constant fear, pressure. And you could literally see the energy being drawn out of the team continuously with her. And yes, at times we delivered and they delivered, but not because they wanted to, almost because they just felt they had to. And it was almost that piece. I've often said to project managers I've worked with in the past, if you put that sort of demand on people, you may get a job done once. You may get that thing over the line once, but you won't get those people coming back to want to deliver for you again at all.
Yeah, and also then you got to wonder what that person's going to do when you're not looking, right? I mean, you're just creating a situation where you're taking away their agency. So one way of I divide it, communications is, are you helping the team see it as a challenge or as a threat? So the language of like, you don't go in the right wing, don't, miss that next sales pitch, you're just, you're creating, putting a person into a mental corner, which may already be in a corner, and you just made less space for it now, and it's sort of very limiting. So if you give, whereas you give someone the kind of chance to give us some agency, the ability to think for themselves, and frankly, you just get out of the way. And like if I had my time again, I think I'd probably too overbearing. I was too, I don't know, probably micromanager. Probably when I look back at my time in law, I would try to get So like, what's interesting is the power of physical touch. So people might think, well, how has it got to do with business? So I'll give you an example. So there's a theory going around the England team. Most of the quote unquote good English players, maybe most of them, are managed by Spanish managers. So Pep, Ancelotti in Real Madrid. You've got Arteta. They're very tactile, right? The Spanish is just very tactile, huggy. My wife works in football, and all their team are Spanish. They're kissing each other all the time. It's just like, it's real. It's just full on. And then they go into an English dressing room. It's just different, right? It's just. And so the power of the high five. So Chris, if I virtually high five you, right? You raise your hand, and people. I don't know if you heard this before, but the science behind high fiving is interesting. So I look at Chris, and Chris will look at me. And for that millisecond, I'm not alone because I look at Chris's eyes, he looks at me, and for that split second, we're together. And in a world where we're just looking at each other a lot and lot less because of screen time, we're just less confident looking at somebody's eyes. And also partly high fiving, partly reminds you of raising your hand, being at school, and you can answer a question. So some of the really good teams, look at the next thing, look at Premiership, they're high-fiving each other a lot. So a long way of saying, I'm not saying you can go and tell your team, right, guys, we're all doing high-fiving today, right? Because that's not, But I think there's ways, I think, of, leading, I think, by example. And and also, if people are very anxious, there are many, well, I'm sure there are more than three, right? Breathing exercise, obviously great, if like bringing people down, getting those planes to land under, Old Trafford. Another one is physical contact from a friend. Hugging is like unbelievably powerful. Even high five, or even fist pump. That's a bit too much. Like fist pumping is, and as long as you look at the person in the eye, connect. I used to also the rule of like eye color. Can I notice the person's eye color? Because only then do I know if I've clocked the person's eyes. I used to make a rule of someone new in the business learning their eye color straight away. Right? Do I know this person's eye color? Because then I knew. And the last one is animals. So pets. So one team I work at now is about to start using a dog at half time. I kid you not. Because to try to bring down the heart rate of the players, anxiety levels. Because the dog won't judge you. They're bouncy. They're just like, they don't care what the score is, right? They're just like running around, and to just break the ice. Well, they've only had one game, so maybe it'll backfire, this idea. But but anyways, but if you have bringing an animal to like getting the rules changed with your landlord, bringing a pet in, easy win, I think.
Wow. What if alpacas, Lee? That would be.
It could be it. You never know. We'll bring the alpacas. Ours won't even follow us into the field. Never mind follow us into a house.
Quite bitey, aren't they? The alpacas. They're quite bitey.
They're not too bad. They're not petting alpacas, unfortunately, ours, but maybe I could train them up and I'll bring them in. If you've got a club that wants an alpaca in, let me know.
Okay.
when Pep calls you up and says, I need an alpaca for half time against United, I'll be there.
Yeah. And actually the link to that is smells as well. So people talk about, how do what words I say are really important. And I've kind of raised the players don't really listen to the words anyway. So let's just spin the words almost. How do we find other ways of getting to people, right, to calm them down? Another one is smell, right? Smell is, so you walk into Sainsbury's today, you're being gamed the whole way you walk through the supermarket. Like the smells you get at the, fruit and veg, they're not what comes from, they're pumped out. The breads, you go to the oven, or you go to the bakery section, that's like bang, it's all. So trying to feel well, actually, what they're trying to do is fruit and veg. I think at supermarkets trying to make you say, oh, this is natural. Oh, there's like fruit, this, bananas grow outside, and that just feels like I feel safe here. And so there's some teams now beginning to pump smells in the changing room. So if the team is feeling very anxious or very just too hyper, aromatic oils was pumped into the changing room. If the team need lifted up a little bit, there's zest, so like lemon type smell, and the players don't even know this. So there've been games because it only works subconsciously, arguably.
Oh, freshly baked bread.
When you're selling a house, that's the one, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, and amazingly, of course, I'm not an expert on how the brain works, but my understanding is with the five senses, only two go direct for processing. One is sight, the other is smell. But it requires very little, energy to, like, if I hold this phone up, right, you just bang, looked it, see it. Whereas listening, you could literally choose to listen to, is a Henry next door, you hit your dog, there's a dog in the background. You can literally, you can move your attention, right, your ear somewhere else. And unfortunately, a lot of managers, I think, and coaches think, well, I'm the CEO, they're going to listen to me. They don't have to listen to you. Maybe they don't want to listen to you.
It's paid versus paid to listen to you or wanting to listen to you as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that is. I really believe that you get people comfortable, right? That's why going back to the little joke thing about if there's pressure in the room, is it the right amount of pressure? Usually it's not, because it's tense. I think in England, I have to say, I don't know, I'm generalising, there's a lot of people just take a bit of time to loosen up a little bit. Is there a way of accelerating that loosening up a little bit?
Definitely. I think I know we'll finish short because I know you've got a meeting after this as well, Eamon, so I don't want to make you late for that at all. One thing that I thought was interesting, I watched the England game at the weekend, so it was Lee Carsley's first game in charge, and I think a couple of things struck me about him. He was, at the start of the game, he was out on the pitch putting cones out for the players, so he was sort of in it at the beginning and in it with them. It felt like he was in it with them. And you may have noticed this more than me, Eamon, at the time as well, but at half time, he was out, sat on the bench by the side of the pitch, at least, I think it was 7 or 8 minutes before the second half was due to start.
I didn't. Actually, I didn't see it, but I didn't see the game because I knew we were going to lose. But I well, that's not really not a very good fan, is it? I did notice. I didn't know he was out that long. Actually, to be honest, I'm lovely to hear. I don't know him. I've never met him. But I'm a big believer in go in. If you're going to talk, if you need to talk 60 seconds, then leave. Just this idea that because I'm a big believer in, if the team need to argue with each other. So look, I can see it in the tapes, with the changing rooms, and when the manager walks in, 3 things normally happen: players stop drinking water or fluids, whatever fluid they're drinking. They stop eating and they stop talking. The first 2 are absolutely primary needs for a player: food and drink. Manager comes in, I think it's out of fear. Oh, Coach Smith's come in. They're like sort of almost sit up and go, and they feel nervous. Speak. So you take away the drink, and then the team communication. So players love communication from other players, even if it's harsh. Because like if you 3 are on the pitch, if you roar at Chris Dink, you're only roaring it because you kind of got on good ground to roar because you 3 of you are on a war, right? I'm just a former player who's like, what do I know about anything in football? Whereas you 3 are peers, and players accept that, but it only happens if they're left alone. So I didn't know. I'm very pleased to hear that. And he was wearing a tracksuit. He's decided to go tracksuit. So he's obviously decided to go slightly differently. Yeah.
Brilliant. Excellent.
Wow.
Thank you very much. Anything that you'd want that you've not shared, Eamon, at all, that you want to share, or any tips from a management perspective when you go back to the business side of things that you've not covered, do you think, as well?
I think one thing is to just have before you communicate with the team in a formal setting, just have an honest think. Are they ready to listen to this? Have they really arrived? Because if someone hasn't really arrived, right, and people got busy lives, right? We all got 10,000 emails, we've got 4,000 inboxes, and I think it takes time for people to kind of, I think, land in a room. And I'm a big believer in a bit of humor, or even if you're not comfortable, I just like saying something, you made a mistake that day, or just to kind of, because if you are a leader, right, people are thinking, oh, he or she's got it all right, but well, certainly my experience, I got, it only appeared better because I looked older, right? Probably that's reality. I wasn't not any better at these stuff, but being and then the other thing is yeah, the inspiration bucket. I think is I'm not sure it's used enough. Actually, I think that's great. And if a team trusts you, and hopefully they do trust you, they will. I think they'll respect you for trying something different. Having I know you can't. I'm not saying you given any given something. But that the thing I mentioned earlier about I'm going to show. I'm looking forward to this now. I want to see how you lose this game, or how you're. We accept we're going to lose the game. I think that there's variants of that. I think people can use. I think some people need a bit of bit of injection of inspiration. I don't think there's any harm to it. But it takes brave. Move away from the PowerPoint. Move away from the numbers on the PowerPoint, and go to where's the human element to all this? Where's the human element to this? Because ultimately, that's what hopefully most of us still are.
Completely, most of us.
Well, I feel like filling machine sometimes myself.
That was brilliant. Any final thoughts, Chris, John, from yourselves at all?
This is going to be another episode that I'm going to listen back to several times and bookmark for those points of inspiration. But yeah, I think Eamon. I think there's a lot of parallels that we should be learning and think of that mantra. I think you're right in the corporate space. We very quickly get very dry, and we lose sight of the leading and influence element, and actually are people really engaged? And some of those fundamentals which are in all terms simplistic, but actually you in the fog of it you just lose sight of it. So I think there's some very important reminders there. Thank you.
Yeah. Even by the way, even like thinking about if you are going to give a update to your teams, maybe feed them and give them drink before you talk.
Mm-hmm.
Like try to get to sit in the mind of the situation of your team, sitting down. If people are hungry and thirsty, again, attention goes out the window. It's like I'm hungry now. I know I'm like if I get hungry, I'm not listening to anybody or thirsty.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Thanks, Eamon. Just a brilliant session. I'm actually leading a coaching group in about 50 minutes. So I'm going to try and put a bit of this into practice then, like straight away, right? Particularly in terms of the arriving and landing. And giving people time and space and, to kind of get into the room to start with. I think what's been quite interesting in some of those sessions where I've been in other groups, it now makes more sense, like now why there's breath work at the beginning and, why there's kind of like, 5-minute pauses and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I'm going to try and tweak how I run that group, like in 50 minutes. I'll chat you and let you know.
Yeah, let me know what the obviously any new ideas you have, because I'm learning myself, obviously. And I mean, there is I know the England under-18 rugby camp. Not that I work with them, but I heard that let's say they're working 2-hour blocks of training. They've now scheduled a so let's say it's from 9 to 11. Their training on-field training is. From 9 o'clock to 9:15 it's called you. It's a bit wooky, but it's called you do you time. I'm not mad about the phrase, but the concept is 15 minutes. You can go on your phone if you want, Chris. Lee, you can go and stretch. John, you can go and do sprints. But your idea is you've got 15 minutes to get ready for training. And however way, I'm not going to prescribe how Chris, Lee, or John gets ready to the level of a training session, but I'm letting you decide. But that's the objective. And I think there's something, that's trying to bring in we live in a very individualized world. And so I think it's that balance. How do you get people to feel individualized and special in a sort of broader team context? So it's just an example. I don't know how you use that in business. Like you could do it in way days, I think, actually. Usually it's like, let's do fun, fun activity from from 10 o'clock. Maybe they're not ready yet to have the fun bit yet, right? Maybe there's a way of bringing the planes in to,
and breaking that norm. I think that's the big thing for me is that, we talked about the football managers sitting in the stands doing something different from the norm. Will they do that? I don't know. But again, it's that breaking the norm in the business world again. Don't necessarily just copy that last leader that you followed in.
Yeah.
Think a little bit outside the box. What could help here? What could be different?
There's one last thing I'll mention. There's a lady called Butsy Butterick who's a communication. She doesn't like the word actually experts, a specialist. Who actually I had a podcast sort of in my previous sort of life, and she always a phrase stuck with me was, before you give feedback or address your team, ask the team, "Hey guys, do you mind if I give you some feedback?" And apparently with Generation Zen, apparently that works can be very effective. Because it's getting people to realize, okay, someone's going to start talking now. And B, it's always respectful, right? You're just not assuming because you're at least on paper, the in charge, or you're the gaffer. You're kind of, I think it's respectful to say, do you mind if I, because then people then are much more likely to listen and be receptive to what you say, apparently. I think that can be used in business.
Mm-hmm.
Even to see you, even a big address. Hey guys, do you mind if I jump in now and say a few words?
Yeah.
Quite funny if someone said no, wouldn't it? No, it did break the ice, right? It would break the ice. It probably will. Somebody will. If it's a close group, someone will go, "No, we heard enough from you, Devlin."
That was fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Eamon, again for agreeing to come on. And thanks, I'll say it again, thanks ever so much for sharing your background and your story as well. Because I think that, again, is just so powerful for people to hear about that change you've gone through there and that success that you're making in minute 9. It really is highly commendable. So well done in it all as well.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the chance. Enjoyed it, actually. I got notes myself here, learn myself. So I look forward how your session goes, Chris.
We'll let you know, Eamon. We'll let you know.
Excellent.
Thanks,
again,
John.
as with a lot of other guests, we'd love to have you back again at some point in the future, probably. I mean, just to recap on what you've been doing, some of the bits that we've been talking about maybe as well. So if we get you back as a second follow-up appearance at some point, and you've got the haircut, so you fit well.
I can tell you how the alpaca went, so.
Exactly.
But the bite marks might have healed by then. Maybe.
Yeah, it wasn't Luis Suarez that bit you, it was the alpaca.
I love it. Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone.
Right,
thanks for
guys.
listening again, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have again. He's been Eamon Devlin, our guest eagle. He's been Chris Dingle. He's been John Lloyd. I've been Lee Smith. And you have been listening to the Just About Managing podcast. Thank you and goodbye, everyone.